Hey everyone, welcome. We're starting by meeting Melville, a young writer searching for details about an old whaling ship that had a run-in with a massive white sperm whale. He wants to write his next book about this legendary event, one that many people have spoken about but no one really knows what happened. Melville visits Thomas Nickerson, one of the whalers from the Essex, who's one of the few survivors of the disaster. Thomas is his last hope for getting an accurate account of the story. Arriving very late at night, he's welcomed by the wife of the former whaler. The couple seems to live there, and after receiving permission, Melville finds Thomas now quite old. The writer offers a large sum of money just to hear the old man's story, but Thomas doesn't easily give in. Traumatized by what happened, he dismisses the writer and ignores his offer. It's Mrs. Nickerson who convinces Melville to try a little harder. She explains that her husband has never shared the story with anyone, not even her, but that he needs to unload it, and it would be beneficial if the writer could get something out of him. After several more attempts, Melville convinces Thomas to share the story that took place when he was a young man starting his career. We go back several decades. Owen is a very skilled navigator, eagerly waiting for his chance to captain his own ship. He's with his pregnant wife, excited about their next voyage, though she's nervous about the potential dangers. However, when Owen goes to speak with the businessman, he finds that his plans have been delayed. He's not the captain, but rather the first mate on this journey. The Essex will be commanded by George, an inexperienced young man, but one who's set to inherit the wealth of the prominent Pard family, known for their whaling expeditions and search for whale oil, which was the primary fuel at the time. Due to high demand, businessmen in this industry were incredibly wealthy. Owen feels uneasy about having to answer to a first-time captain with nothing but a name, but the businessman offers a deal. If Owen returns with 2,000 barrels of oil, he'll be given the chance to captain his own voyage. Owen isn't entirely confident that the businessman will keep his word, but with nothing to lose, he agrees to join the Essex. George quickly makes it clear that he doesn't like Owen very much. Traditionally, the captain selects his first mate, and having this choice taken from him is a blow to George's pride. Finally, the ship sets sail, and at first everything seems to go smoothly despite the tension between Owen and George. However, it doesn't take long for the first major problem to arise. As the crew hoists the auxiliary sails, Owen notices a massive and dangerous storm approaching. This is where the trouble begins. Owen instructs the crew to lower the sails and reduce speed, but George immediately refuses. The first mate tries to explain that the storm looks severe and that rushing into it could lead to disaster, but the captain insists on continuing. In his mind, the crew needs to learn how to handle difficult conditions, and a little storm shouldn't intimidate experienced sailors. Owen considers arguing further but realizes it's pointless. Instead, he stops debating and orders the crew to brace for impact. As expected, the storm is fierce, demanding every ounce of effort to keep the ship steady. George seems slightly shaken by the ocean's fury but merely watches as Owen takes charge of handling the crisis. Once they finally make it through the storm, George calls Owen over and tells him that he didn't appreciate being challenged in front of the crew. Owen is nearly dismissed from his position but convinces the captain that their priority should be collecting 2,000 barrels of oil as quickly as possible so they can part ways. Reluctantly, George agrees to continue working with him. Meanwhile, Thomas reflects on his own emotions at the time, recalling his unease and shock at having to endure such a dangerous journey. It takes 3 months before the crew finally spots their first whale, a long stretch of bad luck. But when the first tails break the ocean's surface, excitement spreads among the men. They quickly follow the standard whaling procedure. The first step is to lower the smaller boats into the water, each equipped with long ropes and harpoons. The men row with determination toward the whales. At one point, Owen points out the animals to young Thomas, explaining what they're looking for: the calf, the mother and the large male, which is the most valuable. Owen doesn't struggle to land a harpoon into the great male sperm whale. Wounded, the massive creature dives at an astonishing speed, pulling meters of rope from the boat. The sailors worry about running out of line, but Owen reassures them that everything is under control. He splices additional rope to extend the length, but just when it seems that even this won't be enough, the whale suddenly stops. The crew is stunned. A few seconds of tense silence fill the air before the sperm whale's body resurfaces, floating lifelessly. The men erupt in cheers before hauling the enormous carcass onto the deck. Without wasting time, they begin the oil extraction process right there. Large chunks of blubber are cut and set to melt. However, the crew soon finds themselves struggling to work their way into the massive creature. Thomas, the smallest among them, is chosen to crawl into the whale's blowhole to scoop out buckets of fat. According to Owen, the real treasure lies deep inside. Struggling to fight the urge to vomit, it's clear the experience is far from pleasant. With the overpowering stench of decay, Thomas descends and does as he's told. With the task completed, the ship sets sail once more, navigating around South America to reach the Pacific Ocean, where they expect to find more whales. However, after nearly a year at sea, they have barely encountered any marine life. The tension between the captain and the first mate only worsens because of this. With George spending most of his time locked away in his cabin and the cargo hold still nearly empty, the crew knows the voyage will be far longer than anticipated. After searching in vain for months, the Essex finally docks in Ecuador, giving the sailors a much-needed break. While there, George speaks with another whaler, who gives him precise coordinates for what he calls a whale paradise, 1,000 leagues along the equator. According to the man's account, the waters there are teeming with so many whales that they wouldn't even have enough barrels to store all the oil. But of course, paradise comes with a cost. The local whaler warns them about a specific whale that roams the area, a massive white and fiercely aggressive male that has been known to attack entire boats and drive whalers away from the region. He tries to warn them of the danger, but the Essex crew refuses to believe such a grim tale. Dismissing the warnings they received in Ecuador, they decide to set sail once again, heading straight for the supposed whale-rich waters. For the first time in a long while, George and Owen actually see eye to eye on something. If they reach this place and find the promised abundance of sperm whales, they'll return home with a full cargo and can finally put their differences aside. However, as they make their way to the location, tensions begin to stir among the crew. Even if the story sounds like mere superstition, many of the men feel uneasy about sailing into the hunting ground of a so-called bloodthirsty whale. The whaler who had spoken of the beast seemed deeply shaken, truly convinced of its terrifying power. Still, George and Owen refuse to let fear stand in their way, pushing forward at full speed. Before long, they spot the first signs of whales. Just as promised, the ocean surface is covered with hundreds of tails breaking the water. Eager for a successful hunt, the whalers lower their boats once again, excitement coursing through them at the sight of such an enormous opportunity. They begin rowing toward the animals, successfully harpooning one or two sperm whales. Before they realize it, the crew is so caught up in the excitement of the hunt that they fail to notice the true danger lurking beneath them. A massive white sperm whale, its body covered in scars from past battles, surges forward and strikes one of the boats with its powerful tail, sending the whalers flying and revealing its immense size. Forced to retreat, the men scramble back to the Essex in a panic. However, the Essex itself is not safe. The whale seems to recognize that the real threat isn't just the small boats, it's the ship itself. With terrifying force, the beast rams into the Essex, tearing through the hull and causing massive damage. The impact leads to oil leaks, and soon a fire breaks out, engulfing the vessel in flames. The surviving crew members rush to the remaining lifeboats, grabbing whatever supplies they can before the Essex is lost. It takes a moment for the men to gather their thoughts, still reeling from the sudden destruction of their ship. Helpless, they watch as the Essex burns and sinks beneath the waves. Once they are far enough away, the terrifying reality begins to set in. Questions that had no easy answers arise. How will they survive with such limited food and water? How will they navigate when their compass and all their tools have gone down with the ship? George has no real solutions. He tries to remain calm and composed in front of his men, but it's clear that he is deeply shaken, carrying the weight of guilt on his shoulders. Time drags on and the sailors drift for weeks, exhausted and starving. Just when it seems that all hope is lost, one of them spots land in the distance. Too weak to celebrate, they focus all their remaining strength on rowing toward the island. When they finally reach the shore, it serves as a brief moment of relief. But the nightmare isn't over. Out of nowhere, the monstrous whale returns, attacking with relentless fury. It smashes into their boats, destroying them one by one, killing some crew members and injuring others in the chaos. After the beast finally disappears, the surviving men collapse onto the sand, too drained to move. Desperate for nourishment, they scavenge whatever they can find. They devour bird eggs straight from their nests and catch fish with their bare hands, eating them raw and still wriggling. As they regain a bit of strength, they light a small fire, hoping that a passing ship might spot them and come to their rescue. However, their hopes are soon crushed. While exploring the island, Owen makes a chilling discovery: several skeletons scattered across the land, the remains of sailors who, like them, had been stranded here, waiting for a rescue that never came. A grim realization settles over them. They are too far from any known routes to be found by chance. If they stay, they will die here just as those before them did. Faced with this harsh truth, some of the men make a desperate choice. They decide to take their chances at sea once more, setting out in their battered boats in a final attempt to survive. While some of the men choose to stay behind on the island and wait for help, Owen refuses to abandon them. He makes a solemn promise to send a rescue ship as soon as he reaches the United States. The film then portrays more harrowing scenes at sea, emphasizing the slow and painful decline of the surviving men. They grow weaker with each passing day, their strength and hope fading as they drift further from home. A new disturbance arises when they realize that one of their crew members has died aboard the boat. While some suggest giving him a burial at sea, Owen hesitates. He sorrowfully remarks that no sailor would throw away something that could mean survival. He tells the crew that their fallen comrade's death could save the rest of them. With great reluctance, he encourages the men to consume the flesh of their departed friend. Reflecting on this moment, Thomas recalls the overwhelming fear he felt, not just of dying but of being the last one left. He dreaded the idea of watching all his crewmates perish before him, knowing that in the end, he might have no choice but to eat their remains until he too succumbed to starvation or dehydration. Haunted by the horrors he endured, Thomas admits that he never found the courage to tell his wife about the unspeakable things he had done to survive. He feared she would no longer love him if she knew he had eaten human flesh. What he didn't expect was that his wife had been listening all along. She interrupts his story, assuring him that no matter what happened, she would still love him. She reminds him that he is a good man despite the terrible things he was forced to do. After this moment of comfort, Mrs. Nickerson urges her husband to continue. Herman Melville, still listening intently, takes notes in his journal, fully prepared to hear the rest of the harrowing tale. Thomas composes himself and resumes the story. 71 days after they had left the island, they are still adrift, nowhere near land, and beginning to doubt whether they can survive much longer. Their resources are so scarce that they resort to drawing lots to decide who must die next to provide food for the others. This time fate deals a cruel hand. The captain, George, loses. Accepting his fate, he hands the gun to his young cousin who has been with them since the beginning and instructs him to carry out the grim task. The boy is horrified and refuses, but George insists. He tells his cousin that if he cannot do it himself, he must pass the gun to someone who has the strength to pull the trigger. With trembling hands, the boy raises the gun, placing the barrel against George's head. But at the very last second, instead of killing his captain, he turns the weapon on himself and pulls the trigger. The act is shocking to all of them. Despite their desperation, the men are still human and they rush to help the boy, but it is too late. There is nothing that can be done. The grim reality sets in. Their best option for survival is to consume the flesh of the young man who in his final act spared his cousin from a terrible fate. To the astonishment of the remaining survivors, it is only shortly after his tragic death that they spot the massive white whale once again. It has been following them all along. Owen, consumed by rage, immediately grabs a harpoon, ready to strike the beast down once and for all. But as he locks eyes with the creature, something shifts within him. He hesitates, realizing that the whale no longer seems like a threat. Instead of attacking, he lowers the harpoon. Without any further aggression, the whale finally turns away, retreating back to its domain, leaving the men barely clinging to life in the open sea. With no other choice, the survivors press on with their journey. Along the way, more boats are lost, and more men perish, some from sheer exhaustion, others sacrificed so that a few might live. In the end, only half a dozen men make it back to port. After enduring a journey that lasted nearly 3 or 4 years, their ordeal finally comes to a close when they are rescued by passing ships near the American coast. As they return, a crowd gathers to greet them, but the survivors have nothing to show for their struggle. No riches, no bounty, only the fact that they made it back alive. Among the crowd, Owen spots his wife, her eyes filled with emotion as she watches him step onto solid ground once more. Overcome with relief, he rushes toward her, but his greatest joy comes when he finally meets his daughter for the first time. Holding his child, he realizes that despite everything he has endured, this moment makes it all worth it. It seems like life will finally return to normal, but the business owners urgently summon George and Owen for a private meeting. There they inform the two men that they must testify about the Essex shipwreck. However, they are given strict instructions to claim that the ship ran aground due to an accident. George is expected to comply without question, as he belongs to a family of influential whaling industry leaders, but Owen refuses outright. He declares that he will not lie, no matter how much the truth might damage the industry. He insists that the only story worth telling is the real one, that a massive whale was responsible for the Essex's destruction. Before walking away, Owen turns to George and urges him to tell the truth as well as a way to honor their fallen crewmates. George remains silent, but when the time comes for him to testify, he ultimately chooses honesty. His statement causes a major uproar among the businessmen, but he stands by his words, knowing he did the right thing. Before parting ways, Owen gifts Thomas one of the whale's teeth, a small keepsake to remember their incredible and harrowing journey, as well as a token of admiration for Thomas's courage. Owen finally secures a ship of his own to command, but he chooses a different path for his family. He moves them elsewhere, deciding to leave behind the perilous life of whaling in search of something safer and more peaceful. Back in the present, Melville now fully understands the incredible tale he has been told. He takes it upon himself to immortalize the story of the Essex and its brave crew, preserving their legacy in the pages of his book. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and drop a like, it really helps the channel. Thanks for watching. Well.